what a week. The powers that ought not to be have been up to their tricks as always, haven't they? We'll get to that. In the meantime, if you want to help support this podcast, and I'm sure you do, go to patreon.com. Find me by name, Neil Oliver, part with a little bit of cash. I do mean little. And sign up to my site. You get an exclusive question and answer session every week, plus early access to everything new. We have the occasional competition. We have a competition on at the moment, so why not get joined up and stuck in? Maybe win a signed copy of my latest book, which is Hauntings, a book of ghosts and where to find them. The link's in the notes below this video. I'll hope to see you there. Okay, let me remind myself what's been getting my goat this week. The talk, and I do it too, the talk is often of waking up. You know, the need to waken up and the need to wake up other people. Wake everyone up to reality. I say it all the time, and I'll probably continue to do so, but it's not the right metaphor. By now, I think the process is more like decompression. If a person has been deep underwater for any length of time, you know, breathing bottled air, they can't just come up to the surface right away. They can't. You've probably heard of the dread condition known to divers as the bends, which is properly described as decompression sickness, and it's a potentially lethal effect of dissolved gases like nitrogen, mostly, forming bubbles in the blood and tissue of the body if a diver who's been way down deep rises too quickly from deep to shallow. It's a bit like what happens when a can of fizzy drink is opened, and you don't want that happening in your bloodstream. It's bad news, and if it's severe enough, it can kill. So rather than go from deep to the surface in one go, a diver has to rise gradually, letting nature take, well, a less dangerous course. Now, I've done a bit of scuba diving in my time, and so I've done a bit of decompression. Not the scary stuff with, you know, decompression chambers like you see in the movies, but the sort that involves waiting, suspended, some way beneath the surface, just holding onto a rope, often in murky water. Well, it's murky water if you do it around the British coastline anyway. And your mind plays tricks, so that while you're waiting there in a sort of limbo, you can't help wondering what's out there in the water, just out of sight, where you can't see it. So I say that rather than insisting people wake up, you know, just snap out of whatever dream and face the real world, that it's more about letting people come gradually up from the deep, from the dark and into the light, taking the time required. It's a scary and a disorienting process, but it's the way it has to be. Help is all around though. There are plenty of people to listen to while you wait, holding onto your rope, taking the necessary time. This week, I continue to listen all the time as part of my ongoing therapy. I listened to a friend of mine, Gareth Icke, as he took a walk in the countryside with a woolly hat on and talked about what happened on that train to Huntingdon in Cambridgeshire. The stabbing of multiple people by a man with a knife. When it comes to what happened on that train, while you were hearing about it, did you have that sense of déjà vu?
And even this specific incident is interesting, because they'd just done a drill in March of this exact scenario of the guy wielding a knife on a train, and they did the drill in the very place where it happened. Now, you can read into that as much as you want, but I will say, you know, there were drills on 9/11, there were drills on 7/7, there were drills on the Boston Marathon bombing. It seems to be a thing that if you look and you go, okay, right, so this has happened, let's have a look. Oh, there were drills. That's the first tick. You go, okay, there were drills. Right, okay, wow, I'm shocked.
It's so helpful, is it not, when someone else puts into words the thoughts that are dissolved in your own thinking, enabling, let's say, the safe and painless release of thoughts that might otherwise expand and do a person harm if they allowed themselves to be overwhelmed by everything all at once. Gareth and I have talked together in the past about how the authorities could never have got people to stay in their homes during the lockdown if they hadn't frightened them into it first. That an idea like digital ID would never fly in this country unless those authorities that want it, in fact that need it to retain control of the masses, can first of all convince enough people there's a terrible, dangerous problem out there that can only be fixed and held at bay with whatever prepared in advance, oven-ready solution they had in mind anyway.
And then you go, right, is there a legislation they want to bring in that they're already talking about using as a cure for the problem? Imagine my shock.
Like Gareth, I'm not denying these terrible events happened and will continue to happen. It's definitely false flag season. And what happened was all too real for the regular people actually involved, and will be again. But when it comes to understanding why those events happen, how they happen, I have questions. Listen, if you will, to Gareth talking about the psychological operation, the PSYOP, as we've learned to call it, that was carried out during the COVID scam. This is a PSYOP. Now, a PSYOP doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means that essentially it's a psychological operation. They want you to think in a certain way. They want you to react in a certain way. Now, we saw throughout COVID the use of behavioural science, the behavioural insights team, and all that kind of stuff. The experts that were appearing on the news weren't virologists, they weren't vaccinologists, they weren't epidemiologists, they weren't zoologists, they were psychologists. They'd be, talking about the uptake of the vaccine, and it's, oh yeah, that's Dave Jones from head of psychology at whatever university. And you're listening to it and going, why am I listening to a psychologist? Because that's how it's done, how it was done to us, how it's still being done. Keep listening. Do you think, like, when COVID ended, when Putin invaded Ukraine and it cured COVID, and COVID before that had cured terrorism? Funny, isn't it? That's right. Don't let the bends get you. Don't have the bubbles form all of a sudden and hurt you. Just decompress. Let the pressure be lifted as you rise towards the surface and the light of realisation. COVID cured terrorism. It did, didn't it? I remember saying to my wife at one point, as the West went eerily quiet, as people stayed in their houses, watching the neighbours from behind their curtains, I remember saying something like, do you think all the terrorists are abiding by lockdown as well? I mean, it was weird, wasn't it? Weird. Where did all the mad knife men go while we were all locked down? Where did all the suicide bombers go? What happened to the sort that would drive a van into a crowd of people? Were we really expected to believe that the sort of nut that would rampage through a market stabbing complete strangers or blow himself up at a concert or run down pedestrians just abided by COVID regulations? That there was no way of carrying out the kind of terrorist attacks that terrorists like carrying out? That even the terrorists felt the need to social distance? How likely was it that the sort of random or radicalised Fruit Loop that would push a blade into a stranger or detonate an explosive-filled waistcoat they were actually wearing, how likely was it that that sort of so-called terrorist would hear Boris Johnson on the telly telling everyone to go home and stay there and think, right enough, no more bombs and knives for me, I'll just stay in the house and watch Cash in the Attic? Gareth puts it better than I can. They say that men can't have two thoughts at the same time or do two things at the same time. It's almost like they can't either. It's like, we've got terrorism, we've got COVID. Should we still do terrorism? Oh, I can't do both. Oh, okay. Well, Putin's invaded Ukraine now. All right, should we keep doing COVID? Can't do both. Can you feel yourself rising gently into shallower water, catching a glimpse of sunlight? Do we think that when Putin invaded Ukraine and cured COVID, that suddenly at that point all those psychologists and all those behavioural manipulation teams within government suddenly got made redundant? No. They just got a different project to work on. Ready to keep rising? Ready to hear someone else notice what you're noticing?
And that's why it has the same flavour of 2020, of the behavioural manipulation, of the attempt to gaslight the public into accepting something. But then, that's down to us, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Because yes, of course, they've got the mainstream media on their side, like, you know, repeating all the bobblehead talking points and all that kind of stuff. Of course they have. That's what they do. But whether or not we drink the Kool-Aid is down to us.
So I say again, rather than an abrupt awakening via a slap in the face or a splash of cold water, I think it's more of a process from darkness to light. In deep water, a person doesn't feel the pressure they've been under. It's only as you begin to rise towards the surface that you realise where you've been. And here's another thing I remember while listening to Gareth. By now, while I listen to the big names with the big numbers and the big audiences, of course I do, by now I actively go looking for and pay at least as much attention to those who, like Gareth, like me to be honest, are marginalised, with smaller numbers, with fewer views. For a long time now, when I see or hear someone being driven to the edges with all the usual labels heaped upon them, conspiracy theorist, extremist, crank, anti-Semite, now, whenever I become aware of a voice like that, I listen all the more acutely to it, all the more carefully. Author Jonathan Swift wrote, "When a true genius appears in the world, you may know him by this sign, that the dunces are all in confederacy against him." The powerful apply the pressure that pins people to the seabed. We've all been down there. So many are still there, not realising they're in deep water. They're dependent on pressurised, bottled air. Even if they want to, they can't just come to the surface all at once. I am mindful always that while the past 5 years have seen me see some things differently, that I have risen some of the way, that it would be foolish of me to think I am fully on the surface even now and seeing everything clearly. The truth is, I don't know what I don't know. So I'm still hanging in the water, wondering what's out there. While I wait and watch, I keep listening to those that will help me keep rising. I'll hope to see you on the surface.